Welcome back. The purpose of my particular podcast is to promote positive masculinity, is to promote the ad mentality, accountability, discipline, and determination. And so you must understand that it was quite a bit of a shock for me to find out that on a lot of the points that I espouse, Dr. Jordan Peterson is in agreement. And so the video that we're about to get into is one where Dr. Peterson really hammers down, especially for many young men, what the meaning of life actually is. And now, apart from the political rhetoric that's espoused in this video by Dr. Peterson, as I mentioned, there are a lot of things that we agree with. There are a lot of things that I look at and take value from a psychological standpoint, because he is a clinician. And so it's his job to understand the nuances behind the reason why we do certain things. And so I thought that his particular explanation was a very enlightening and eye-opening. So let's get into the video. We're going to look at the entirety of it. So at some point during the video, if you tired of his voice or mine, then we can understand that, okay? Because this is going to be more than 11 minutes in its entirety, and we're going to pick out points at every appropriate occasion, okay? So let's get into the video and see what we can find out.
Well, I'll tell you a couple of strange things, things that I don't really understand. The first is, when we've done the analysis of the effects of the future authoring program, it has had a differential impact on men. And it's had a particularly differential impact on what I would call excluded men. And so that would be non-Western ethnic minority men, or what, majority men who aren't doing very well. So for example, at Mohawk College, the future authoring program had a particularly robust effect on Mohawk College students who were men who hadn't done very well in high school and who hadn't picked a major that had a destination, a career destination at its end. So you can imagine those people they have an ambiguous relationship with the idea of education, and they're not oriented specifically towards a goal. They're not very motivated.
So now from this particular point, you notice that Dr. Peterson makes mention of the future authoring program quite a bit in the first part of his discussion. Now, that program is developed by himself and two other widely known clinicians. And the purpose of the program is to be intentional about one's future. And even on the website, it invites an individual to daydream in regards to what they would want their future to be, how their future would actually make things better for those around them, what specific goals that they needed to set in order to reach their future. And the whole program is geared toward giving individuals direction. This is what you say you want to become. This is what you want to accomplish in life. Well, what does it take to get you to that particular point? And so now an individual is forced to be more deliberate in their thinking. They're forced to be more introspective. They're forced to look at things and see that there is a way to become what it is that they want to become in life. And so after looking at the program myself, I was very amazed at the fact that so many people have responded. So many people have taken that program and put it into use. And evidently it's having a profound effect on them. It's having an effect for the good. So let's keep going.
Now, why did it have a differential effect on men? That's a good question. Well, first of all, the women are doing better. So it might just be a matter of the fact that it does better for people who aren't doing as well, and at the moment, most of them are men. I think that might be part of it, but I don't believe that's all of it. I think that part of the reason that women are doing better is because they're agreeable. And so if a system sets out a structure and says, here's a pathway to attainment, the women won't rebel against that, they'll go along with it, and that's working very well for them at the moment. The men, especially the men on the disagreeable end of the distribution, and there's way more men on the disagreeable end of the distribution than there are women, right? That's what you get from if you look at overlapping normal distributions. So there's the female distribution for agreeableness, male distribution for agreeableness. Tremendous overlap. Okay, women are higher. All the really agreeable people are women. All the really disagreeable people are men. And maybe the real differences occur at the extremes, right? And it's a very interesting side effect of overlapping distributions. So people can be mostly the same, but that can still produce radical differences. Disagreeable men won't do anything they don't want to do. They just say, up yours. I'll go home and play video games. I'm not listening to your stupid classes. And why should I work for you? I'll just go have fun. I'll do my own thing. I don't think they're motivated. And so then if you take the men who are like that and you say, okay, what do you want?
So we're going to pause at this particular juncture in the video, because I think that there are some points that Dr. Peterson made that are noteworthy for us. Because what he's about to do, he's about to go into the qualifications of the future authoring program. But now, before we get to that, let's look at what he just presented. So the various distributions that are in play here, right? So there's one for men, one for women. And so what Dr. Peterson is saying is that you notice that the most agreeable people in society are women, and the most disagreeable people in society are men. So how does that line up? Because you understand, now I'm a layman when it comes to psychology, right? So how does that line up to actual experience in life? Well, if you notice, especially when it comes to women, in our society, they nurture, right? They teach, they support emotionally. They are very concerned with the emotional stability of those around them, especially in their own household. We can see that. And as a result, the fact that the children that we have in society that are raised in a two-parent household have quite a bit of emotional intelligence because of the fact that their mother is doing the best that she can to convey to them the importance of emotions, right? And we appreciate them for that. But then if you swing over to the disagreeable end, as men, we're supposed to be providers and protectors and teachers. So does that line up with being disagreeable? Absolutely it does. Because in certain circumstances, in certain situations, you have to be disagreeable in order to secure the resources that your family needs. So is it just a matter of being disagreeable in general? No. What it is the ability to add resistance to your actions based upon the situations that you meet. If there's a job that you have to go on to and there's things that you have to do, the adequate amount of resistance will help you to continue. Really, we could call it endurance, fortitude, the ability to look at difficult things and to be able to face them head on and to continue. That's a form of being disagreeable. And so I think that the distributions that Dr. Peterson are talking about are absolutely spot on. I think that that's true. And I think it has more to do with human nature than societal constructs. A lot of times you hear people say, well, society dictates these certain things. But if left alone, even in countries that are not as developed as the United States, in third world countries, you see that men and women take on the same roles for themselves. Could it be that they're adequately qualified for those roles that they're taking on from a natural point of view, from a natural perspective? I'll let you figure that out. So now let's continue in the video and see what else we can glean from this particular video from Dr. Peterson.
You can have what you want, but you have to figure out what it is. So then they write down what they want and they think, oh, hey, well, that might be worth having, so maybe I'll put some effort into it. That's what it looks like to me. Now, that's weak evidence, and this is a weak argument, but I'm trying to stretch out my understanding to account for this. But I'll tell you something else that's really weird. I don't understand this either. So more than 90% of the people who watch my videos on YouTube are men. Now that's weird because about 80% of psychology students are women. So that is not what you would expect, right? You would expect that the majority of them would be women. And you might say, well, it's because of the political stance I've taken. And I thought, well, that's possible. So I went and looked at the demographic data because I have that. Well, before I did any of the political videos, 85% of my viewers were men. So it's actually increased a bit. It's increased by 6%. And that's not trivial, but it was still overwhelmingly men. So that was interesting. I thought, what the hell? Why is that exactly? And then now I've been watching crowds when I've been talking to them. And the crowds that have come to see me in person. This happened at the University of Toronto free speech debate. And I actually noticed it and commented on it before the debate took place, because I was talking about intrinsic differences between men and women. And I looked around the room and I thought, hey, 80% of the people in this room are men. So I had all the women stand up and then all the men stand up. I said, look, like, here's a natural experiment. For some reason, 80% of the people who showed up to this are men. Now everybody thought I was kind of cracked to do that. And it was a risk, you know, but I thought, no, there's something going on here. And then what's interesting now is that every public appearance that I've made that's related to the sort of topics that we're discussing is overwhelmingly men. It's like 85 to 90%. And so I thought, wow, that's weird. Like, what the hell's going on here exactly? And then the other thing I've noticed.
So now at this particular point, you can really see the scientists come out in Dr. Peterson in the way that he's approaching things. First, he theorizes that there may be some basis for the reason why 80% of the individuals who look at his lectures on YouTube are men. And then that same percentage you see in crowds that he goes and delivers lectures to. Is there some special reason why more men are being drawn to him and to what he says than women? Because if you notice now, at the beginning of this particular line of reasoning, Dr. Peterson said that more women usually take his class. Does that line up? Absolutely, because in our culture, I think really the women are more in touch with the way that they feel. They're more empathic than most men. And that's because, as we mentioned, they are more agreeable. And so what they want is everyone, as we mentioned, to be emotionally stable. They want everyone to have self-esteem and pride in themselves. And so that's something that comes along with it. But now the abundance of men showing up to events that he's having has to have some further implication, some deeper implication. We'll find out what that is. Let's continue.
Is that I've been talking a lot to the crowds that I've been talking to, not about rights, but about responsibility, right? Because you can't have the bloody conversation. What are you doing? You can't have the conversation about rights without the conversation about responsibility, because your rights are my responsibility. That's what they are, technically. So you just can't have only half of that discussion. And we're only having half that discussion. And the question is, well, what the hell are you leaving out if you only have that half of the discussion? And the answer is, well, you're leaving out responsibility. And then the question is, well, what are you leaving out if you're leaving out responsibility? And the answer might be, well, maybe you're leaving out the meaning of life. That's what it looks like to me. It's like, here you are.
So now, a powerful conclusion. He is, at this point, bringing his particular point home. He is stressing what he has found from all of the natural experiments that he's done, the theorizing that he's done. Now he is making the premise extremely clear. He's saying that the meaning of life is responsibility. Responsibility. And I think that that's in line with something that a proverb I heard that's probably thousands of years old. You know, it's good for a man to see good for his hard work. And I think that that hard work that's mentioned in that proverb has to do directly with responsibility. Taking on responsibility and then seeing good for the things that you have handled in the proper way. Let's continue.
Suffering away. What makes it worthwhile? Rights? You know, you're completely out. You have no idea what it's almost impossible to describe how bad an idea that is. Responsibility. That's what gives life meaning. It's like lift a load. Then you can tolerate yourself, right? Because look, you're useless, easily hurt, easily killed. Why should you have any self-respect? That's the story of the fall. Pick something up and carry it. Make it heavy enough so that you can think, yeah, well, useless as I am, at least I could move that from there to there. Well, what's really cool about that is that when I talk to these crowds about this, the men's eyes light up. And that's very, like, I've seen that phenomenon because I've been talking about this mythological material for a long time. And I can see when I'm watching crowds, people, you know, their eyebrows lift, their eyes light up because I put something together for them. And that's what mythological stories do. So I'm not taking responsibility for that. That's what the stories do. So I say the story and people go click, 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 you know, and their eyes light up. But this responsibility thing, that's a whole new order of this, is that young men are so hungry for that, it is unbelievable. And one of the things I've been talking to some of the people who've been running for the Conservative leadership in Canada, and I've been talking to them about, well, the difficulties they have communicating with young people, because Conservatives, what the hell are they going to sell to young people, right? Because being Conservative is something that happens when you're older. They can sell responsibility. No one's selling it. And the thing is, for men, there's nothing but responsibility. You know, I was watching The Simpsons the other day. I watched the first Simpsons episode, and I deconstructed it. And so it's really interesting. So what happens in the first Simpson episode is that it's Christmas, and Homer and Marge are going to buy some Christmas presents, but Homer doesn't get his Christmas bonus. And so he's absolutely crushed by that. And that actually is a recurring theme in The Simpsons, where Homer loses his job or something like that, or can't make enough money. He's completely crushed. Even though he's kind of useless, bumbling, laughing fool of a guy, you know, the thing that gives that show its soul is that he's still oriented towards his family. That's what makes him honorable, is that foolish as he is, he's decided to adopt responsibility for his family and to try to bear that. And so he's a holy fool. He's not a complete fool. And it's so interesting watching the story because he suffers dreadfully as a consequence of not being able to fulfill his responsibility. Well, that's for men. Women have their sets of responsibilities. They're not the same, right? Because they're complicated, because women, of course, have to take primary responsibility for having infants at least, but then also for caring for them. They're structured differently than men. For biological necessity, even if it's not a psychological issue, and it's also partly a psychological issue. Women know what they have to do. Men have to figure out what they have to do. And if they have nothing worth living for, then they stay Peter Pan. And why the hell not? Because the alternative to valued responsibility is impulsive, low-class pleasure. And you saw that in the Pinocchio.
Now, that is that's a statement to think about. Valued responsibility versus low-class pleasure. One gives you immediate gratification, something that a lot of people are looking for nowadays. Immediate gratification. You perform an action, you feel the pleasure from it. And many people today can be characterized as lovers of pleasure, right? But then valued responsibility. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, the ability to evaluate your life, pick something that's worth carrying, then pick that particular responsibility up, bear the weight of it, and then move it successfully. See, what he's describing is something that has to be done over time. This particular weight that has some value to you, you're able to pick it up, take it up on yourself, and then carry it for an unspecified amount of time. You're carrying this particular weight, whether it's the weight of being a moral human being, whether it's the weight of caring for your family, whether it's the weight of helping an aging parent, regardless of what this particular weight is. Notice he didn't say burden, he said weight, load. So you pick this up and you take it with you and you carry it and you do the best that you can with it. And as a result of carrying it, you learn the value of responsibility, because in that carrying, you gain self-esteem, self-respect, and you gain direction in life. So it's important. It's important to pick something that you can carry, or that you're willing to carry, or that in the end, the results of you carrying it is something that you can live with. You pick it up, you take it with you, you learn that responsibility is good. So no wonder when Dr. Peterson is talking, the eyes of the men in his audience light up. there's something that awakens in them. Because instead of painting these individuals as individuals that are part of some patriarchy that's oppressive, I hate to use that term, but that's the term that Dr. Peterson mentioned, instead of allowing them to feel that they are a part of a gender that is responsible for outright oppression, you're giving them another message. You're saying, listen, you are going to find value in responsibility. You're going to find value in picking something up and moving it. And you're going to see that in your doing that, not only do you enhance the lives of those around you, but you enhance your own life. You bring value, substance to your own being. That's a powerful thought. Let's keep going.
Story, right? That's Pleasure Island. It's like, well, why lift a load if there's nothing in it for you? That's another thing that we're doing to men that's a very bad idea, and to boys. It's like, you're pathological and oppressive. It's like, fine then, why the hell am I going to play? If that's the situation, if I get no credit for bearing responsibility, you can bloody well be sure I'm not going to bear any. But then, you know, your life is useless and meaningless, and you're full of self-contempt and nihilism, and that's not good. And so that's why I think, that's what I think's going on at a deeper level with regards to men needing this direction. A man has to decide that he's going to do something. He has to decide that. Yeah, well, you know, partly what you're trying to do in the future authoring process is say, okay, well, what's your highest value? Right? It's the star. It's like, okay, what are you aiming for? You can decide, man. But, you know, there's some criteria. It should be good for you. It should be good for you in a way that facilitates your moving forward. Maybe it should be good for you in a way that's also good for the family and the community. It should cover the domain of life. I mean, there's constraints on what you should regard as a value. But within those constraints, you have the choice. You have choice. Well, the thing is that people will carry a heavy load if they get to pick the goddamn load. So, and they think, well, I won't carry any load. It's like, okay, fine, but then you're like the sled dog that doesn't have a sled to pull. You're gonna tear pieces out of your own legs because you're bored. You know, people are pack animals. They need to pull against a weight. And that's not true for everyone. It's not true particularly, say, for low conscientious people. I mean, maybe they're open and creative or extroverted and some other things. But for the typical person, they'll eat themselves up unless they have a load. This is why there's such an opiate epidemic among dispossessed, white, middle-aged guys who are unemployed in the US. It's like they lose their job, they're done, right? They despise themselves. They develop chronic pain syndromes and depression. And the chronic pain is treated with opiates. It's like, that's what we're doing. So, yeah, that's what it looks like to me. Is you have to, and it's so interesting to watch the young men when you talk to them about responsibility. They're so goddamn thrilled about it. It just blows me away. It's like, really? That's the counterculture. Grow the hell up and do something useful. Really? I could do that? Oh, I'm so excited by that idea. No one ever mentioned that before. It's like rights, 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 rights. Jesus, it's appalling. And I feel that that's deeply felt by the people who are coming out to listen to these sorts of things too. They've had enough of that. So, and they better have, because it's a non-productive mode of being. Responsibility, man.
So now, I had to pause at that point too, because now that was a profound statement that was made also. A profound line of reasoning, I would say. And so you can see why it is that, especially the younger men, they're being attuned correctly, because as men, in order to be a protector, a provider, and a teacher, there is most definitely a certain amount of responsibility that is required in that particular instance. How are you going to provide for a family, a wife and children, if you don't adopt the concept of being responsible for those individuals? How are you going to do it? How are you going to hold down a job if you don't accept the premise of being responsible for the 40 hours a week that are necessary each week? How are you going to do that? Responsibility is the key. Even if in the beginning there are mistakes that are made on your part, to continue to carry the load as best you can through time. You become better. You become more in tune with what's necessary in order to have the outcome that you want. And so you're able to garner the energies and the resources that are necessary to be successful at your responsibilities. And that's what Dr. Peterson is really espousing. Here is where me and him meet head on and agree without a doubt. If you look at some of my previous videos, especially the manhood series, I am going in on the concept of accountability, discipline, and determination. But there can be none of those things if an individual is not willing to accept the responsibility of taking on these particular qualities for their own lives. This is part of responsibility. This is part of picking that load up and carrying it. Did you notice that Dr. Peterson said that individuals are more likely to pick up a load and carry it if they get to choose the load? That's a powerful statement. Because if you're looking at a situation and you're trying to analyze it, and you're seeing that there is something in this situation that you can handle, that you can be responsible for, and that you can take it through long-term effort to its completion, and the completion yields something good, you'll forever be locked into that mode. If it ever happens to you once, I guarantee you, you'll continue to be locked into that mode, because what it is it becomes an addiction, a positive addiction, if I would say. You're doing things, you're working hard, you're making sure that you're meeting your responsibilities, and you are getting the best outcome that you possibly could because you're putting energies where they should be. And that's part of the reason why those young men, their eyes were lighting up. As Dr. Peterson said, he connected some things for them. The way that we're made as men, we're made to take on responsibility. Even our biological structure, we're made to take on the responsibilities that require work. We're prepared for those things. And a lot of our emotional development, the way that we develop as men, is geared toward taking on responsibility so that those around us can benefit. So I think Dr. Peterson is right on in this particular instance. I have to agree with him. So there's a few seconds left. Let's get into the last part of this video, okay? Let's see the final closing thoughts that Dr. Peterson has.
That's where the meaning in life is. So.
Okay. So, what are our final thoughts on the video? I think that the way Dr. Peterson has presented this information is very, very necessary at this point in time, because we do have a lot of young men and men in general who have become disillusioned with where they are in life. When you think about some of the things that are happening, you can feel the disillusionment. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, the rise of the opioid epidemic. And a lot of that is due to the fact that men who have devoted their whole lives to certain jobs, careers, upon losing that particular part of their life, then they are thrown into despair and disillusionment and depression. And as a result, they're being treated with opioids. So the example is there. The anecdotal evidence is abundant. But now, as opposed to despair and disillusionment, what can we gain from this particular video that would be of some substance to us? I would have to say that Dr. Peterson saying that responsibility should be primary in the man's life. I have to agree with that without a doubt. Because I think responsibility is the difference between being a male and being a man. I think the acceptance of responsibility, especially initially, is what helps a male to grow into his manhood. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, being able to choose what load you want to bear, picking that load up and carrying that load for a substantial amount of time, or until the goal that you have in mind has been accomplished. I think that process helps a man to develop, or helps a male to develop into a man. Because as we mentioned, taking on responsibility for anything and being able to carry that particular load to completion is what helps an individual to develop into a man. It helps you to embrace manhood, because there are going to be difficulties, without a doubt. There are going to be difficulties when it comes to responsibility for anything. When you look at being responsible for a family, difficulties. If you look at being responsible for yourself and your own livelihood, difficulties. If you look at being responsible for maybe the culture around you, the community, difficulties. Difficulties are a part of responsibility. But the ability to face those difficulties, surmount them, and reach your goal is something that every male has to accomplish in order to become a man. You have to do it. And at various junctures in life, you can see that play out. You start school, go to kindergarten, then you go to middle school, then from middle school, you go to high school, then you graduate, then you go to college, then you have a family. See, at every juncture in life, there is going to be a situation where you are responsible for the outcome of the things that you're involved in. So responsibility, as Dr. Peterson said, there's nothing but responsibility for men. Nothing but. That's all we see. That's all we see. Because responsibility allows us to continue to help those around us. The group that's around us. Responsibility helps us to keep those individuals afloat, while at the same time making sure that we're afloat also. Can you see that? Look at the example of a present father. What is his responsibility? His responsibility is to provide for his family, to protect his family, and in a lot of cases, from his example, to teach his family. Now, I know, especially lately, there aren't many times that a father can sit down and impart lessons to his children. But more than not, his children are looking at the kind of example that he's setting. Is dad hardworking? Is he dedicated to making sure that we have everything that we need? What is his relationship like with mom? What is his relationship like with us, his interaction with us? They're looking at all of these things, and what they're going to do based upon his example of responsibility, they're going to go out into the world and either emulate their father and become responsible men if they're boys. And for girls, they're going to go out into the world and they're going to use their father as a measure for the men that they involve in their life in the long term. So responsibility is an important factor, if not the primary factor, in how we move as men. We have to adopt it, because responsibility really sets the tone for the success of ourselves and those around us. What are you willing to be responsible for? And it's the same thing that I mentioned in earlier video. What are you willing to be accountable for? What do you owe? And then based upon what you owe, then what discipline do you need to employ in order to make sure that you are successful in paying what you owe? And then of course, determination is involved, because once you establish what you need to pay, then there has to be some time that elapses between what you figure out to be what you have to pay and when you successfully make that payment. But remember, Dr. Peterson mentioned, this is a load that you picked. So the goal at the end, the result, is what you want. And so you have to be determined to get to that goal. No matter what you have to endure, no matter what difficulties you have to go through, you have to be determined to get to that goal. And all of that, if you mix it together, is what you call manhood. Dr. Peterson said it's the meaning of life. And so the same can be said for women, but this is a man's channel run by men, for men. So we focus on the men in this particular aspect. Responsibility is key to finding value in yourself and those around you. That was a powerful video and much commentary to go with it, I'm sure. But as always, we hope that you enjoyed the commentary on this particular video. I kind of hesitated because in this space, Dr. Peterson is one that is very authoritative. He's an individual that's outspoken, and a lot of the things that he says, I am in full agreement with. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Be easy.